Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most profound questions humanity has ever asked. Are we alone in this universe? Not as a thought experiment, not as science fiction, as a real scientific question that some of the brightest minds on Earth have spent decades trying to answer. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the silence we've received back is not just strange, it's terrifying. If you're someone who looks up at the night sky and feels that pull, that mix of wonder and unease, then you're exactly who this video was made for. Hit like, subscribe, and join us on this journey. There is a point in the sky with no name, not a star, not a nebula, not a black hole or a dying sun, or a collision of galaxies caught mid-disaster. Just a coordinate, one of hundreds of billions in this galaxy alone, where, if something were looking back, it would see a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star on the outer edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. That world has been broadcasting for nearly a century. Radio waves, television signals, military radar, deliberate transmissions aimed at specific stars with specific messages encoded in the mathematics of prime numbers and the chemistry of life. Those signals travel at the speed of light. They do not stop. They move outward in every direction, an expanding sphere of noise growing larger every second, passing star after star after star. Nothing has answered. That is not a poetic observation. It is a data point, and it is the strangest data point in the history of science. Not because the silence is unexpected, but because the numbers say it should not exist. Start with the scale. The Milky Way contains somewhere between 200 billion and 400 billion stars. That range exists not because the count is difficult in principle, but because the galaxy is too large and too dense at its center to inventory precisely from where Earth sits. 200 billion is the conservative floor. 400 billion is closer to the working estimate. Either number is beyond what the human mind was built to hold. So consider instead what it implies. If only 1 in a million of those stars hosts a planet in the right temperature range for liquid water, that is still 200,000 worlds. If only 1 in a billion of those worlds ever produces life of any kind, the result is not 0. The math has never produced 0. Every time the calculation is run with even the most conservative assumptions, something comes back. And then there is the time. The universe is roughly 13.8 billion years old. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. That gap, 9 billion years, is the window in which everything the universe needed to do before Earth could exist had time to happen. Stars formed and died, and scattered heavy elements across space. Those elements condensed into new stars, new planets, new chemistry. The process ran for 9 billion years before this planet cooled enough to hold an ocean. If life arose elsewhere even 1 billion years before it arose here, that civilization has had 1 billion years longer to develop, to expand, to transmit, to leave some mark on the galaxy that instruments could detect. 1 billion years is longer than the distance between the first multicellular life on Earth and the moment a human being first looked up and wondered what was out there. The silence against that backdrop is not neutral. It requires an explanation. There is a word for the problem. It does not come from a telescope or a laboratory. It came from a question asked out loud, not as a formal proposal, not as a written argument, but as an offhand remark that stopped a table cold. The remark was simple. Where is everybody? That question has never been answered, and the longer the silence holds, the heavier it becomes. Not the weight of nothing, but the weight of something that should be there and is not. The numbers did not come from hope. They came from a meeting of scientists in a mountain observatory. gathered to ask a question that had never been formally posed before. Not how to find life, but how many chances there had been. The result was not an answer. It was a framework for understanding how large the problem actually is. The framework works like a chain. Each link is a question. How many stars form each year in the galaxy? Of those, how many have planets? Of those planets, how many sit in the zone where water stays liquid? Not frozen, not boiling, but held on a surface long enough to do chemistry. Of those worlds, how many actually develop life? Of those, how many develop intelligence? Of those, how many build technology capable of sending a signal across space? And of those, how many survive long enough for the signal to travel far enough to be detected? Multiply the answers together, and the result is the number of civilizations that should exist in the galaxy right now, at this moment, capable of being heard. The problem is not that the answers are unknown. The problem is that even when the most cautious estimates are used, even when each link in the chain is given the smallest plausible value, the final number does not collapse to zero. It stays stubbornly, uncomfortably above it. In the decades since that framework was first assembled, each link in the chain has been examined by instruments that did not exist when the question was first posed. The results have not made the silence easier to explain. They have made it harder. Stars with planets are not rare. They are the default. The working estimate now is that most stars in the galaxy host at least one planet. Many host several. The question of whether planets exist has been settled so completely that it no longer registers as a question. It is simply a property of stars, the way mass and temperature are properties of stars. Of those planets, the ones capable of holding liquid water are fewer, but not vanishingly fewer. Surveys of nearby stars have returned world after world, sitting at the right distance from the right kind of sun. Some of them are rocky. Some of them show early chemical signatures that instruments can read from light years away. The zone where water can persist on a surface is not a narrow band that Earth happened to fall into by accident. It is a region that the galaxy populates with regularity. And then there is the chemistry. This is where the unease begins to arrive before the silence has even been fully measured. Because the building blocks of life, the organic molecules that on Earth assemble into amino acids, into proteins, into the machinery of cells, are not confined to Earth. They are not even confined to planets. They drift through open space in molecular clouds. They have been found on the surfaces of meteorites that fell to Earth from the outer solar system, preserved in rock that formed before this planet existed. The chemistry that life uses did not originate on Earth. It arrived here, or assembled here, from ingredients that were already present across the solar system, across the galaxy. Life on Earth did not invent its own raw materials. It inherited them from the universe. That is not a minor detail. It means the starting point for life, the chemical foundation from which everything else follows, is not a local accident. It is a galactic condition. The molecules are already there, on world after world, in cloud after cloud, waiting for the right temperature and the right liquid and enough time. Earth had enough time. 4.5 billion years from cooling rock to radio telescopes. The galaxy had 9 billion years before Earth existed to run that process elsewhere, on worlds that have since lived and died and scattered their chemistry back into space. The chain does not break at the chemistry. It does not break at the planets. It does not break at the stars. Somewhere in the chain, something stops. Something takes a process that the numbers say should be common and makes it rare enough that the sky is silent. Or something else is happening. Something the framework was not built to account for. That is the problem the silence poses. Not whether life could exist. The chemistry answers that, not whether the conditions exist. The surveys answer that. The problem is the gap between what the numbers predict and what the instruments have returned. The instruments have returned silence. And silence against numbers like these is a result that demands an explanation. The search has a shape. It is not a sweep of the entire sky, listening to everything at once. It is a series of narrow beams, pointed at specific coordinates, tuned to specific frequencies, run for specific windows of time before the telescope moves on. Understanding what has actually been done, the real geometry of the search, is the only way to understand what the silence actually means. Because the silence is not total, and the search is not what most people imagine it to be. Begin with the frequency. When the decision was made to listen for signals from other civilizations, the first problem was not where to point the instruments, it was what to listen for. The electromagnetic spectrum is vast. Radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays. A signal could arrive on any of it. Choosing where to listen meant making an assumption about what another civilization would choose to transmit on, which meant making an assumption about how another civilization thinks. The choice landed on radio, specifically on a narrow band of radio frequencies clustered around the natural emission frequency of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. The reasoning was that any civilization capable of building a transmitter would know hydrogen, would know its emission frequency, and would recognize that frequency as a universal landmark. A beacon placed there would be found. A listener tuned there would find it. That reasoning may be correct. It may also be the first place where the search built an assumption into its foundations that has never been examined as carefully as it should be. But set that aside for now. The instruments were built. The frequencies were chosen. The sky was divided into coordinates, and the search began. Not continuously, not comprehensively, but in fragments. Different telescopes, different teams, different targets, different sensitivities. The search has never been a single unified project running without interruption. It has been a scattered, underfunded, intermittent effort, conducted at the margins of mainstream science for most of its existence. The total amount of sky that has been searched with sufficient sensitivity to detect a signal comparable to Earth's own transmissions. Not a powerful directed beam, but the kind of ambient radio noise a technological civilization leaks into space, is a fraction so small it requires a careful analogy to convey. Imagine the ocean, not a map of the ocean itself, every cubic meter of water from the surface to the floor, from one coast to another. Now imagine that everything known about the ocean's biology, its chemistry, its currents and temperatures and depths, has been determined by examining a single glass of water drawn from one location on one afternoon. That is approximately the proportion of the search that has been completed. The sky has not been searched. A sliver of the sky has been sampled. The silence returned so far is the silence of that single glass, real and without explanation, but not a verdict on the ocean. And yet within that sliver, something happened. On a night in late summer, a radio telescope was running its standard sky survey, sweeping across coordinates, logging signal strengths, moving on. The telescope was not pointed at anything specific. It was not listening for anything in particular. It was doing what radio telescopes do, collecting data to be reviewed later by a researcher with a printout and a pen. The researcher found a signal. It lasted 72 seconds, the maximum window the telescope's geometry allowed before the rotation of the Earth carried the beam past the source. It was narrow band, meaning it occupied a very precise slice of the radio spectrum, of the kind that natural astrophysical processes do not typically produce. It was strong, strong enough that the researcher circled it on the printout and wrote a single word in the margin. That word was not a scientific designation. It was not a formal annotation. It was a reaction, the kind that escapes before professional caution can intervene. The word was wow. The signal was never heard again. The telescope returned to that coordinate dozens of times over the following years. Other instruments were pointed at the same region of sky. Nothing came back. The source did not repeat. It did not vary. It did not do anything that a transmitting civilization would be expected to do if it were trying to be heard. What it was has never been established. Natural explanations have been proposed and examined and found wanting. Not definitively ruled out, but not satisfying either. The signal fits the profile of what a deliberate extraterrestrial transmission would look like, better than it fits the profile of anything the instruments were known to produce, or any astrophysical phenomenon that had been catalogued at that point. It remains the one result the search has ever returned that could not be immediately explained. One signal, 72 seconds, never repeated. Everything else has been silence. That asymmetry, one anomaly against decades of nothing, sits at the center of the problem in a way that neither answer resolves cleanly. If the signal was natural, it means the search has returned nothing. If it was not natural, it means something transmitted once in the direction of Earth and then stopped, or moved, or decided not to continue. None of those options are comfortable. All of them are consistent with the data. The search continues. Newer instruments with greater sensitivity are sweeping wider fields with faster processing. The glass of ocean water is slowly, incrementally getting larger. But the rate at which it is growing and the size of the ocean it is drawn from means that a comprehensive search, one that could credibly claim to have listened to a meaningful fraction of the sky, remains generations away at current trajectories. The silence so far is real. It is just not complete. And incomplete silence, against the backdrop of what the chemistry and the surveys have returned, is not reassurance. It is a different kind of weight, the weight of a question that has been asked long enough and carefully enough that the absence of an answer has itself become the data. Something is out there, or nothing is. The instruments cannot yet say which. What they can say is that the search has barely begun, and the one moment it returned something worth circling on a printout, that something never spoke again. The silence has a shape. It is not uniform. It is not the same kind of silence across every possible explanation. Some explanations make it smaller, a technical problem, a search that has not looked hard enough, a frequency that was never tuned correctly. Other explanations make it larger, much larger. This is where the problem stops being about radio telescopes and starts being about the nature of civilizations themselves. Begin with a simple observation. Life on Earth has been present for roughly 3.5 billion years. For almost all of that time, it produced nothing detectable from space. No signals, no structures visible at interstellar distances, no chemical signatures in the atmosphere that could not be explained by natural processes. A telescope orbiting a distant star and pointed at Earth for most of its history would have returned nothing unusual. Just a wet rock in a habitable zone doing chemistry. The window in which Earth has been detectable, the period during which its signals have been leaking into space, is less than a century. Against 3.5 billion years of life, that is nothing. A rounding error, a single frame in a film that runs for geological ages. Now extend that observation outward. If the gap between life arising and life becoming detectable is billions of years, then the number of civilizations that are detectable at any given moment is a tiny fraction of the number that exist or have ever existed. Most life, if it exists, is silent, not because it chose silence, but because it has not yet reached the threshold where its activity becomes visible across interstellar distances. The silence may not be absence, it may simply be earliness, a universe full of life that has not yet learned to shout. That explanation is available. It is not unreasonable, but it carries a problem of its own, because the universe is old enough that the earliness argument has limits. If life arose elsewhere 1 billion years before it arose on Earth, that civilization is not early. It has had 1 billion years to develop, to expand, to do something that leaves a mark. 1 billion years is long enough, by enormous margins, for a civilization with any interest in expansion to have spread across the entire galaxy. Not by crossing the distance in a single generation, but by moving incrementally, star by star, the way life on Earth has spread across continents, not by crossing them in a single migration, but by filling available space over time. The math on this is not complicated. At a fraction of the speed of light, well within the reach of physics as it is currently understood, a civilization could seed the entire Milky Way within a few million years. Against a billion-year head start, a few million years is negligible. The galaxy should already be full, not of radio signals necessarily, but of something. Structures, modified stars, waste heat from computation on a scale that would be visible to instruments sensitive enough to look. The instruments are sensitive enough to look. They have looked. The galaxy does not appear to be full. This is the sharpest edge of the problem, not the silence from radio telescopes. That silence is explicable by the limits of the search. The deeper silence is the absence of any large-scale engineering, any megastructure, any sign that a civilization has ever done with a solar system what civilizations tend to do with available resources: consume them, reshape them, expand. There have been candidates, stars that dim in patterns that do not match known natural processes, infrared excesses around stars that could indicate waste heat from structures absorbing and re-radiating stellar energy. Each candidate has been examined. Each one has, so far, resolved into a natural explanation on closer inspection: dust, geometry, the ordinary strangeness of stellar physics. None have held. The galaxy looks, to the instruments available, like a place where nothing has ever built anything large enough to see. That requires an explanation. Several have been proposed. They are not all equal. Some are more disturbing than others. The first is that the step from simple life to complex life is far harder than the chemistry suggests. Amino acids drift through space. Meteorites carry organic molecules. The raw ingredients are common, but the distance between a self-replicating molecule and a cell with a nucleus, between a bacterium and a body plan with differentiated tissues, may involve transitions so improbable that they happen only once, or a handful of times, across the entire observable universe. On this account, Earth is not typical. Earth is a statistical outlier so extreme that it borders on unique. The universe is full of chemistry and empty of complexity. The second is that complex life arises, but intelligence does not. Or that intelligence arises, but technology does not. Each step in the chain from chemistry to civilization involves a transition that the fossil record on Earth crossed, but crossed in ways that may not generalize. Eyes evolved independently dozens of times on Earth. They are apparently easy, given enough time and selection pressure. But technological civilization has arisen exactly once in 4.5 billion years of life on this planet. Once. A single lineage, a single sequence of accidents and pressures and extinctions that happened to produce a species that builds radio telescopes. If that transition is rare, not impossible, but rare enough to happen once per planet that ever hosts life, or once per 100 such planets, or once per million, the galaxy may be sparsely populated with minds. and those minds may be separated by distances so vast that the signals between them are still traveling, will always be traveling, will never arrive. The third explanation is different in kind from the first two. It does not place the obstacle in the past. It places it in the future, or more precisely, in the near future, in the window between a civilization becoming detectable and a civilization becoming capable of expansion. This is the explanation that carries the most weight and the most dread. It proposes that the chain does not break at life, or at intelligence, or at technology. It proposes that something happens to civilizations, something that stops them, not slowly, not gradually, but at a specific threshold, a point that every civilization reaches, a point that very few survive. The filter is not behind, it is ahead. And if that is true, if the emptiness of the sky reflects not absence, but elimination, something that technological civilizations reliably encounter and reliably do not survive, then the silence is not a mystery waiting to be solved. It is a warning. The filter is a threshold, not a physical barrier, not a wall in space or a limit imposed by the laws of physics. A threshold in the development of a civilization, a point that the trajectory of technological growth reliably reaches, and that the trajectory of survival reliably does not clear. The concept is simple enough to state in a single sentence. Something kills civilizations before they become visible. The question is, where in the sequence that something sits? There are two possibilities. Either the filter is behind, meaning Earth has already passed through it, meaning the hard part is already done, meaning the emptiness of the galaxy reflects how difficult it is to get to where Earth already is. Or the filter is ahead, meaning Earth has not yet reached it, meaning the hard part is coming, meaning the civilizations that came before did not go silent because they failed to arise, but because they arose and then stopped. The first possibility is uncomfortable, but survivable as a thought. The second is something else entirely. Start with the filter behind. If the obstacle is in the past, the candidate moments are identifiable. The origin of life itself, the jump from raw chemistry to a self-replicating molecule, is one. It happened on Earth, but how it happened is not understood well enough to say whether it was inevitable or fortunate. The fossil record shows life appearing relatively quickly after the oceans formed. That could mean the origin of life is easy, which is bad news for the filter behind hypothesis. Or it could mean that, in the rare cases where conditions are right, life moves fast, which says nothing about how rare the conditions need to be. The development of the complex cell is another candidate. For most of life's history on Earth, cells had no nucleus. The genetic material floated free inside a simple membrane. Then something happened, a merger, an absorption, a symbiosis between two different types of simple organism, and a new kind of cell appeared. A cell with a nucleus, with compartments, with the internal machinery that all complex life on Earth is built from. That event appears to have happened exactly once in the entire history of life on this planet. One merger, one accident, one transition that all animals, all plants, all fungi trace back to. If that transition is the filter, if the gulf between simple and complex cellular life is where the chain breaks for most worlds, then the galaxy is full of bacteria and empty of everything else. Earth crossed that gulf. The crossing may have been so improbable that it has happened nowhere else in the observable universe, or so few times that the resulting civilizations are separated by distances that make contact geometrically impossible. That would explain the silence. It would make Earth an anomaly so extreme that the loneliness is simply the arithmetic of probability playing out across cosmic scales. It is not a comforting explanation, but it is a survivable one. It means humanity is rare, possibly unique, and the silence reflects that rarity. It does not mean anything is coming. Now consider the filter ahead. This version requires a different starting point. It requires accepting that the steps behind, the origin of life, the complex cell, multicellular organisms, intelligence, technology, are not the hard part. That they happen with enough regularity across enough worlds that the galaxy should by now show evidence of what comes after. And it does not. Which means what comes after does not persist. The pattern would look like this. Life arises, it complexifies, it develops intelligence, it builds technology, the technology grows. And at some point in the growth of that technology, something goes wrong. Not on some worlds, on all of them, or nearly all of them, with a consistency that has scrubbed the galaxy clean of every civilization that came before. The candidates for what that something is are not difficult to generate. A civilization that develops the ability to release engineered pathogens before it develops the wisdom to govern that ability. A civilization that destabilizes its own climate irreversibly in the window between industrialization and the technology that could correct it. A civilization that develops weapons capable of rendering a planet uninhabitable and uses them once in a conflict that ends everything before anything can be rebuilt. These are not science fiction scenarios. They are extrapolations of trajectories that are already visible on Earth, already in motion, already producing the early signatures of exactly the kind of crisis the filter hypothesis predicts. That is what gives the filter ahead hypothesis its particular weight. It does not require imagining something alien or exotic. It requires only projecting forward the things that are already happening and asking whether the projection reaches a stable endpoint. The silence suggests it does not reliably, not for the civilizations that came before. But there is a version of the filter hypothesis that is darker than civilizational self-destruction. Self-destruction, at least, implies an ending that comes from within, a failure of governance, a failure of restraint, a failure to survive the window of maximum danger between capability and wisdom. That version is bleak, but it is at least internal. The civilizations that did not make it failed themselves. The darker version proposes that the failure is not internal, that it does not come from within the civilization at all. It proposes that the galaxy is not empty because civilizations destroy themselves. It proposes that the galaxy is empty because something else destroys them. Not a natural process, not a physical law, something that acts, something that has been acting repeatedly across geological timescales, with a consistency that has left no survivors capable of transmitting. This version has a name. It is not a scientific consensus. It is not even a leading hypothesis in the formal literature. But it has been taken seriously enough by enough serious people that it cannot be dismissed as speculation dressed up as theory. It is called the Dark Forest, and it begins not with a threat, but with a logic. A logic so cold and so complete that once it is understood, the silence of the sky stops feeling like a mystery and starts feeling like an answer. The logic begins with two facts that are difficult to argue with. The first is that the universe is very old, and resources within it are finite. Stars burn out, planets are consumed. The matter and energy available to any civilization are not unlimited. They are a fixed quantity that can be used, transformed, and exhausted. Any civilization that persists long enough will eventually face the problem of resources. Any civilization that grows will face it sooner. The second is that it is impossible to know with certainty the intentions of another civilization. Not difficult, not unlikely, impossible. The distance between stars is so vast, and the time required for communication across those distances so long, that by the time a signal arrives and a response is sent and that response arrives, generations have passed, centuries. The civilization that sent the first signal may not resemble the civilization that receives the reply. Its intentions, its values, its internal politics, all of it is inaccessible. All that is known is that it exists, that it is capable of transmission, and that it is, by definition, a competitor for the same finite resources. From those two facts, a logic assembles itself. It does not require malice. It does not require aggression as a default state. It requires only rationality in the face of uncertainty. If another civilization exists and its intentions cannot be verified, there are two possibilities. It is a threat or it is not. If it is not a threat and it is treated as one, the cost is a missed opportunity for cooperation, a loss, but a survivable one. If it is a threat and it is not treated as one, the cost is annihilation. The asymmetry of those outcomes, multiplied across the timescales of civilizational survival, produces a single rational response. Strike first, or stay silent and hope not to be found. This is not a psychological claim about how civilizations behave. It is a game-theoretic claim about how any sufficiently rational actor must behave once it accepts the two premises. The universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter moving through it, silent, armed, listening. Every signal is a position revealed. Every transmission is a risk taken that cannot be untaken. Because signals, once sent, do not stop. They travel outward forever, announcing the location of their origin to anything within range that has the instruments to detect them. On this account, the silence is not the sound of an empty universe. It is the sound of a universe that learned, at some point in its history, not to speak. Civilization after civilization reaching the threshold of detection, recognizing the logic of the forest, going quiet. Or not going quiet fast enough, and paying the price for it. The civilizations that survived are the ones that stopped transmitting. The ones that are gone are the ones that did not understand, or did not believe, or transmitted anyway, and were heard by something that acted on what it heard. Earth has been transmitting for nearly a century. The signals are already out there, already moving, already passing the nearest stars, and continuing outward into the galaxy. That cannot be undone. Whatever is in the forest has already been given Earth's coordinates, assuming anything is close enough and sensitive enough to have detected the signal against the background noise of space. Set the dark forest aside for a moment, not because it is wrong, but because it is one answer among several, and the others deserve their weight before the final accounting is made. There is a version of the silence that requires no hunters and no game theory. It requires only distance and time, and the particular shape of a universe that is expanding faster than light can cross it. The observable universe, the sphere of space from which light has had time to reach Earth since the beginning, contains roughly 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion. But the observable universe is not the whole universe. It is simply the part that is, in principle, reachable by information traveling at the speed of light. Beyond its edge, space continues. How far it continues is not known. It may continue without limit. And it is expanding. Every point in space is moving away from every other point, carried by the expansion of space itself rather than by motion through space. The galaxies at the edge of the observable universe are not traveling away from Earth. The space between them and Earth is growing, carrying them with it. At sufficient distances, that expansion is faster than light. Not because anything is moving faster than light through space, but because enough space is being created between 2 points that the distance between them grows faster than light can cross it. This means the observable universe is shrinking, not in physical size, The light from more distant objects is still arriving, still pushing the edge outward. But the window in which communication between distant civilizations is possible is closing. Galaxies that are currently reachable in principle will eventually cross a threshold beyond which no signal sent today will ever arrive. They are not gone. They are simply becoming permanently unreachable, carried beyond the horizon by an expansion that does not stop. On timescales long enough, every civilization in the universe will find itself alone. Not because others do not exist, but because the universe itself has grown too large for any signal to cross. Isolation is not a possibility. It is the destination. The universe is not moving toward connection. It is moving away from it and has been since the beginning. That realization changes the texture of the silence. It is not only that nothing has answered, it is that the window in which an answer was ever possible may already be narrowing. Civilizations that arose in distant galaxies billions of years ago and transmitted signals that have been traveling ever since may never reach Earth. Not because the civilizations did not exist, but because the universe moved the destination before the message could arrive. The silence may be full of signals that will never land. And yet that is still not the deepest problem, because the dark forest and the expanding universe and the great filter are all answers to the question of why the silence exists. They are explanations. They fit inside the framework of a universe that operates by knowable rules, a universe where the silence has a cause that physics, or game theory, or probability can account for. There is a possibility that fits none of those frameworks. It does not propose a cause for the silence. It proposes that the silence is telling something about the nature of reality itself, about what the universe is and what it is for, and whether those are even questions that have answers. It begins with a number, a single, deeply strange number that sits at the foundation of modern cosmology and has never been satisfactorily explained. The universe, as best as instruments can determine, is geometrically flat. Not curved inward like the surface of a sphere, not curved outward like a saddle. Flat to a precision that the measurements can detect. For the universe to be flat, the total energy density of space, the amount of matter and energy packed into every cubic meter, averaged across the whole, must be exactly equal to a specific critical value. Not approximately equal, not close, exactly equal to within the precision of every measurement that has ever been made. The probability of that occurring by chance, of all the possible values the energy density of the universe could have taken, landing on the one that produces perfect flatness, is not small. It is so close to zero that the word small does not carry the right meaning. And flatness is not the only number like this. The strength of gravity relative to the other fundamental forces, the mass of the electron, the rate of expansion immediately after the beginning. Each of these values sits in a range so narrow that shifting any one of them by a fraction would produce a universe in which stars do not form, or atoms do not hold together, or the whole thing collapses back on itself before a single second passes. The universe is not just habitable. It is fine-tuned for habitability to a degree that has no natural explanation within the current framework of physics. This is not a theological argument, it is an observational one. The numbers are what they are. The question of why they are what they are is open, uncomfortably, durably open, in a way that most scientific questions are not. One answer is that there is no why. The numbers are what they are, and in a universe where they were different, no one would be here to notice. This is true, and it is unsatisfying because it explains the observation without explaining the improbability. Another answer is that there are many universes, an ensemble of realities, each with different values, and this one is simply the one where the values permit observers to exist. This answer is mathematically coherent and completely unverifiable. There is no observation that could confirm it. There is no experiment that could test it. It moves the question rather than answering it. The third answer is the one that intersects, at an angle that is difficult to look at directly, with the question of whether the universe is inhabited. It proposes that the fine-tuning is not accidental and not the result of an ensemble. It proposes that the universe was constructed, not by a god in any theological sense. The proposal does not require intent in the human meaning of the word. It proposes that the universe is a simulation, a computational environment running on substrate that exists outside it, built with parameters set to produce something specific. Complexity, perhaps, structure, life, observers. If that's true, and it cannot be ruled out, not by any instrument or argument currently available, then the question of whether the universe is inhabited takes on a different character entirely. The inhabitants are not just life forms on planets orbiting stars in a galaxy. They are, in some sense, constructs, products of a process running outside the reality they perceive as fundamental. And the silence takes on a different character too. Not the silence of an empty universe, not the silence of hunters in a dark forest. The silence of a system that was designed to produce exactly one observable civilization, or exactly the civilizations it was designed to produce, with the parameters set accordingly. A universe that appears fine-tuned for life, because it was tuned for life, but tuned by something external, for reasons that are not available to anything running inside it. This is the edge of what can be said, not the edge of speculation, the edge of the knowable, the point at which the frameworks that physics provides run out of purchase, and the questions continue past them into territory where the instruments cannot follow. The silence lives at that edge. It has always lived there. Every answer proposed for it either dissolves into a deeper question or arrives at a boundary that cannot be crossed with the tools available. That is not a failure of science. It is a description of where science currently stands, at the edge of a problem that may be the most important problem the species has ever posed, staring into a silence that has been running since before Earth existed, with instruments that have barely begun to listen. Somewhere beyond the orbit of Neptune, two objects are leaving. They are moving away from the Sun at roughly 55,000 kilometers per hour, fast enough to escape the solar system's gravitational pull, slow enough that they will spend tens of thousands of years crossing the void between this star and the next. They carry instruments that have long since stopped returning useful data. Their power sources are fading. Within a generation they will be silent, not destroyed, not stopped, simply too dim to hear across the distance they will have traveled. They also carry something else. Each one carries a gold-plated disk. On the disk is encoded, in formats chosen to be deducible from first principles, a selection of what Earth is. Mathematical relationships, diagrams of human anatomy, the position of the Sun relative to 14 pulsars, dead stars that spin at precise, measurable rates, functioning as coordinates that any civilization capable of detecting the disk would be capable of reading. Sounds, music, a spoken greeting in dozens of languages, the brainwave recording of a person thinking about time and love and the stars. The disks were not sent because anyone expected them to be found. The distances involved make an encounter with another civilization statistically improbable across any timescale that means anything to a human mind. They were sent as something closer to a declaration, a statement made outward into the dark, not because an answer was expected, but because the alternative, saying nothing, felt like a different kind of failure. Earth has been making that declaration for nearly a century now, in every direction at once, at the speed of light. The signals have already passed the nearest stars. They are moving through the sparse stellar populations of the outer galaxy, growing weaker with distance but not stopping, never stopping, carrying the coordinates and the chemistry and the electromagnetic fingerprint of a world that does not yet know if anything is listening. That is the position Earth occupies, not a searcher standing at a telescope, waiting, a transmitter, already broadcasting, already audible to anything within range that has chosen to listen. The question of whether humanity is alone has been answered in one direction. Earth has announced itself. The answer in the other direction has not come. What that silence means depends entirely on which explanation is correct, and the explanations do not resolve into each other. They are not a spectrum with a comfortable middle. They are discrete possibilities, each one with a different implication for what comes next, each one sitting in the data with roughly equal weight. If the filter is behind, if the hard part is already done, if complex life is rare enough that Earth may be among the only minds in the galaxy, then the silence is the sound of a universe that produced intelligence once, here, against improbable odds, and has not managed it again. That is an isolating thought, but it carries within it something that resembles responsibility. If Earth is rare, then what happens here matters, in a way that extends beyond this planet and this civilization. The loss of this world would not be one loss among many. It would be a subtraction from something that may already be close to zero. If the filter is ahead, if the silence is the accumulated absence of every civilization that reached this threshold and did not clear it, then the silence is a pattern, and Earth is inside that pattern, approaching the same threshold, with the same capabilities and the same failure modes that ended everything that came before. The silence on that account is not neutral data, it is a record of outcomes. And the outcome recorded, again and again, across the history of the galaxy, is the same. If the dark forest is real, if the silence is strategy rather than absence, if the galaxy is populated by civilizations that have learned that survival requires silence and that detection means death, then Earth has already made the critical mistake. The signals are out, the coordinates are known. Whatever is in the forest has been given a location. Whether anything acts on it and on what timescale is not a question the instruments can answer. It is a question that will answer itself, or not, on a schedule set by something other than human decision. And if the silence is structural, if the universe is simply too large, too old, too committed to its own expansion to permit the kind of contact that would resolve the question, then the answer was never available. The signals from distant civilizations are traveling toward Earth and will never arrive. Earth's signals are traveling outward and will never arrive at their destinations. The universe is full of transmissions, crossing a space that is growing faster than they can cross it. Messages sent between minds that will never know each other existed. Conversations begun and never completed, because the distance between the speakers is increasing faster than the words can travel. That version of the silence is the one that carries the particular weight of the irreversible, not threatening, not a warning, simply a fact about the geometry of the universe, that it was built in a way that tends toward isolation, that the window of possible contact is not permanent, that whatever chance existed for civilizations to find each other is narrowing with every second that passes and every meter of space that expands between them. The question that opened this, "Are we alone?" does not have an answer. Not yet, possibly not ever, depending on which explanation is correct and whether the search ever reaches the scale required to return something more than a single 72-second anomaly, circled on a printout by a hand that understood, in that moment, that something had happened that the frameworks available could not fully contain. But the question has a shape now that it did not have. Before it was examined carefully, it is not a simple binary, life or no life, contact or no contact. It is a problem with structure. with internal logic, with implications that extend in different directions depending on which part of the structure is load-bearing. And it is a problem that Earth is not observing from a safe distance. Earth is inside it, already transmitting, already audible, already committed by a century of signals that cannot be recalled, to a position in the forest that cannot be changed. The sky at night looks the same as it always has. 400 billion stars in this galaxy alone. The same silence across all of them that has always been there. That was there before the first instrument was built to listen. That will be there long after the last one goes dark. But the silence sounds different now. It always sounds different once the numbers are known. Once the age of the universe is held alongside the emptiness of the sky, and the two are allowed to sit next to each other without resolution. It is not the silence of nothing. It has never been that. It is the silence of something that has not spoken yet, or something that learned not to, or something that spoke once and was answered in a way that ended the conversation permanently. The signals Earth sent are still traveling. They will be traveling long after every human being alive today is gone, long after the civilization that built the transmitters has either survived its threshold or joined the silence it spent so long trying to understand. Somewhere out there, the disk is drifting, gold-plated, patient, carrying the coordinates of a world that looked up and listened and heard nothing and decided to speak anyway. Whether anything will ever hear it is a question the universe has not answered. It may never answer it. That may be the answer.